It was a quiet night in our village. The moon hung high in the sky, shining bright like a silver coin. The stars twinkled, and a cool breeze made the leaves rustle softly. My friends and I sat around a fire, telling stories to pass the time. The flames danced, casting shadows on our faces. As we laughed and joked, an old man named Baba sat nearby. He was known for his wisdom and many stories. But tonight, his face was serious. He leaned closer to us and spoke in a low voice, "Listen carefully, children. There are dark things happening in our village." We all stopped talking and turned to him. Baba continued, "Have you heard about Kofi and Abina? They are brothers who used to be good men. But now, they have changed." I felt a chill run down my spine. Kofi and Abina were popular in our village. They were strong and always helped others. But lately, they had been acting strangely. They spent less time with friends and more time alone. Baba looked around at us, making sure we were listening. "They say these boys have found a way to gain power," he said slowly. "A terrible way that involves stealing innocent lives." My heart raced as I listened. Stealing lives? What could that mean? I looked at my friends, and I could see that they were scared too. The fire crackled loudly, breaking the silence. Baba continued, "They go to the hospital at night when no one is watching. They take newborn babies from their mothers." His voice was heavy with sadness. "They believe that by eating the flesh of these children, they can become stronger." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My mind raced with images of Kofi and Abina sneaking into the hospital under the cover of darkness. It felt unreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. "Do not let them fool you with their smiles," Baba warned. "They are dangerous now." The fire flickered as if it understood the fear in our hearts. We all sat in silence, thinking about what Baba had said. The laughter from earlier was gone, replaced by a heavy feeling in the air. As we prepared to go home that night, I couldn't shake off the unease that had settled inside me. I glanced back at the fire one last time, before heading into the darkness of my home. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a nightmare that would change everything in our village forever. Kofi and Abina were brothers, but they were not just any brothers. They were known throughout our village for their strength and charm. Everyone admired them. Kofi was tall and muscular, with a smile that could brighten anyone's day. Abina was slightly shorter, but just as strong, with a laugh that echoed like music. They were the kind of men who could lift heavy things and help anyone in need. For years, they were the pride of our village. They joined in festivals, played soccer with the kids, and helped farmers carry their harvests. People loved them, and I was no different. I looked up to them and wanted to be like them when I grew older. But one day, something changed. I first noticed it during a village gathering. Kofi and Abina stood off to the side, whispering to each other instead of joining in the fun. Their faces were serious, and their smiles seemed to fade away. I thought maybe they were tired or had a problem, but as days turned into weeks, they became more distant. At first, no one talked about it. We all hoped they would return to their old selves. But then strange things began to happen. They stopped helping others and rarely left their home. When people saw them in the village, their eyes looked dark and empty, as if they were hiding something terrible inside. One evening, I was walking home from the market when I saw Kofi standing alone by the path. He looked lost in thought. I wanted to ask him what was wrong, but something held me back. There was a coldness about him that made me uneasy. "Hey, Kofi," I called out, trying to sound cheerful. He turned to me slowly, his eyes narrowing as if he didn't recognize me at first. "What do you want?" he replied sharply. I felt a shiver run down my spine at his tone. "Just wanted to say hi," I said quickly, before walking away. As I left, I could feel his gaze on my back, heavy and unsettling. Abina was not much better. One day, I saw him staring at the ground near the riverbank where we used to fish together. When I approached him, he looked up with a strange smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What do you want?" he asked in a low voice. "Just checking on you," I replied nervously. He shrugged and turned away from me without saying another word. It felt like he was hiding something deep inside him, something dark and dangerous. As time went on, rumors began to spread through the village about Kofi and Abina's behavior. People whispered about how they had been seen leaving the hospital late at night. Some said they had been acting strangely even before Baba's warning about stealing babies. The more I heard these stories, the more worried I became. What was happening to my heroes? Why were they acting this way? It felt like a shadow had fallen over our village, a shadow that grew darker every day. Despite my fear, I couldn't shake off my curiosity about what was going on with them. The brothers who once brought joy to our lives now seemed like strangers hiding a terrible secret. Little did I know that soon, I would uncover the truth behind their darkness, a truth that would haunt me forever. It was a hot afternoon when I first heard the whispers about the hospital. I had gone to the market to buy some vegetables for my mother. As I walked through the crowded stalls, I noticed a group of women gathered together, their voices low and worried. I stopped to listen, curious about what they were saying. "Have you heard?" one woman said, her eyes wide with fear. "Babies are going missing from the hospital." My heart skipped a beat. Missing babies? I couldn't believe it. The hospital was supposed to be a safe place where mothers and their newborns were cared for. I moved closer, trying to catch every word. Another woman spoke up. "I heard that some mothers went to check on their babies and found empty cribs. It's like they just vanished." Her voice trembled as she spoke. The first woman nodded. "They say it happens at night when the nurses are busy or when no one is watching. It's so scary. What kind of person would take a baby?" I felt a chill run down my spine. The stories reminded me of Baba's warning about Kofi and Abina. Could they be involved in this? The thought made me shudder. As I stood there, listening to the women, I saw one of my friends, Alma, walking by. I waved her over and pulled her aside. "Alma, have you heard about the missing babies?" I asked urgently. Her face turned pale. "Yes. Everyone is talking about it. They say it's happening more often now." She looked around as if someone might be listening. "Some people think Kofi and Abina are behind it." My stomach twisted at the mention of their names. But why would they do something like that? I asked, trying to understand. "I don't know," Alma replied, shaking her head. "But they've been acting strange lately. It's like they're hiding something." We both stood in silence for a moment, feeling the weight of fear in the air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the market square. I felt uneasy as I thought about Kofi and Abina, two men I once admired, now wrapped in dark rumors. That evening, as I walked home, my mind raced with thoughts of what I had heard. What was happening in our village? Why were babies disappearing? And why did Kofi and Abina seem to be at the center of it all? I reached my house and found my mother cooking dinner. She smiled at me, but I couldn't smile back. My heart was heavy with worry. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing my silence. I nodded, but didn't tell her about the rumors or my fears. I didn't want to scare her or add to the worry that already hung over our village like a thick fog. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't sleep. The stories of missing babies haunted me. Images filled my mind, images of Kofi and Abina sneaking around the hospital under the cover of darkness. What if they really were taking babies? What if they were no longer the good men we once knew? I closed my eyes tightly, hoping that when I opened them again, this nightmare would be over. But deep down, I knew that something terrible was happening in our village, and it was only just beginning to unfold. The sun had set, and the night was quiet. I couldn't stop thinking about the rumors of the missing babies. My heart felt heavy with worry, and I knew I had to find out the truth. I decided to follow Kofi and Abina. Maybe they were hiding something, and I needed to know what it was. That night, after everyone in my house had gone to bed, I quietly slipped out. The moon was bright, lighting up the path ahead of me. I walked slowly, trying to be as quiet as possible. My heart raced with fear and excitement as I made my way toward Kofi and Abina's house. When I arrived at their home, I noticed that their windows were dark. It seemed like no one was inside. But then, I remembered that they often went out at night. I took a deep breath and decided to wait nearby. After a while, I heard voices in the distance. My heart jumped as I saw Kofi and Abina walking down the road. They were talking quietly, looking around as if they were being careful not to be seen. I felt a mix of fear and curiosity. I followed them at a distance, keeping to the shadows. They walked quickly, heading toward the edge of the village, where old houses stood abandoned. My stomach twisted with nerves, but I knew I had to keep going. Finally, they stopped in front of an old house that looked like it had been forgotten by time. The walls were cracked, and weeds grew all around it. Kofi and Abina exchanged a few words before they entered through a broken door. I crouched behind a bush, my heart pounding in my chest. What were they doing here? Why did they come to this creepy old place? I waited for a moment, gathering my courage before sneaking closer. Peeking through a cracked window, I could see inside the house. It was dark, but there was enough light from the moon for me to see what was happening. My breath caught in my throat as I realized what they were doing. Kofi and Abina stood around a large pot that sat over a small fire. The pot was bubbling, and strange smells filled the air. They were chanting softly in a language I didn't understand, their faces serious and focused. But what shocked me the most was what lay on the floor beside them, small bundles wrapped in cloth. My heart sank as I recognized what they were, babies. My mind raced with disbelief and horror. They were really taking babies. I wanted to scream, but forced myself to stay silent. This couldn't be happening. The brothers who once brought joy to our village were now involved in something so terrible that it made me sick to my stomach. As they continued their chanting, I felt tears welling up in my eyes. How could they do this? How could they harm innocent lives? My heart broke for those babies who had no idea of the danger surrounding them. Suddenly, Kofi looked toward the window where I was hiding. Panic surged through me as I realized he might have seen me. Without thinking, I turned and ran back into the darkness of the night. I sprinted through the village streets, my heart racing faster than my feet could carry me. Fear pushed me forward until I finally reached my home. Bursting through the door, I collapsed onto my bed, gasping for breath. The images of what I had seen filled my mind, Kofi and Abina standing over that pot, their faces twisted with something dark and evil. The world outside felt different now. It felt dangerous. I lay there wide awake, staring at the ceiling long into the night. The truth was more horrifying than any nightmare. Kofi and Abina were not just brothers, they were monsters hiding behind friendly smiles. And now that I knew their secret, there was no way to forget it. The next day, I couldn't shake off the terrible images from my mind. I felt like I was carrying a heavy weight on my shoulders. I wanted to tell someone what I had seen, but who would believe me? Kofi and Abina were still well liked in our village, and people would think I was just spreading rumors. I spent the morning trying to act normal, but it was hard. My friends talked and laughed around me, but I felt like I was in a different world. The sun shone brightly, but all I could think about were those babies and the dark ritual I had witnessed. That evening, I decided to go back to the old house. I needed to see if Kofi and Abina were still there and if the babies were okay. My heart raced as I made my way through the village again, this time with more determination. When I reached the old house, it looked just as creepy as before. The door hung open slightly, creaking in the wind. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, feeling a mix of fear and courage. The inside was dark and musty. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled stale. I moved quietly, trying to listen for any sounds. My heart thumped loudly in my chest as I stepped carefully through the rooms. Then, I heard voices coming from a room at the back of the house. My stomach twisted with fear as I crept closer. Peeking through a doorway, I saw Kofi and Abina again. They were standing around that same large pot, their faces serious and focused. But this time, something was different. The bundles that had been on the floor were now gone. My heart sank as panic filled me. Where were the babies? What had they done with them? I watched in horror as Kofi lifted something from the pot, a piece of meat that looked raw and bloody. Abina grinned as he took it from his brother's hands. They both seemed excited, their eyes shining with something wild. "Tonight we will be stronger," Kofi shouted, raising the piece of meat high in the air. "The power will be ours." I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They were eating raw meat. My stomach churned at the thought of what it might be. The reality hit me hard. They were not just taking babies, they were using them for their dark rituals. I felt sick as fear washed over me like a cold wave. What kind of monsters were they? How could they do this to innocent children? My mind raced with questions, but there was no time for answers. Suddenly, Kofi turned his head sharply toward my direction. "Did you hear that?" he asked Abina. My heart stopped. They knew someone was there. Without thinking, I turned and ran back through the house, my feet pounding against the floorboards. "Get him!" Kofi shouted behind me. I sprinted out of the house and into the night, my breath coming in quick gasps. The darkness surrounded me like a thick blanket as I ran through the village streets, not daring to look back. I didn't stop until I reached my home. Bursting through the door, I locked it behind me and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. My heart raced wildly in my chest. I knew now that Kofi and Abina were truly dangerous. They were not just brothers who had changed, they had become something evil. The thought sent chills down my spine. That night, as I lay in bed wide awake, fear gripped me tightly. What would happen to those babies? What would happen if Kofi and Abina came after me? The darkness outside felt alive with danger. I realized that I couldn't keep this secret to myself any longer. I had to warn others about what was happening before it was too late. But how could I make them believe me? How could anyone understand that two men we once trusted had turned into monsters? The next day felt heavy. I couldn't focus on anything. My mind was filled with thoughts of Kofi and Abina and the horrible things I had seen. I knew I had to do something, but fear held me back. What if they found out I was watching them? What if they came after me? That evening, I decided to gather my courage and go back to the old house again. I needed to know what they were planning. I wanted to understand their dark ritual, even if it scared me. As the sun set, I crept through the village streets once more. The air was cool and still, but my heart raced as I approached the old house. This time, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I had to see what they were doing. When I reached the house, it was dark inside, but a flickering light from the back room caught my eye. I moved quietly, careful not to make any noise. As I got closer, I could hear Kofi and Abina talking in low voices. Peeking through the doorway, I saw them standing around the large pot again. The fire crackled beneath it, casting eerie shadows on their faces. They were dressed in strange clothes, dark robes that made them look even more mysterious. Kofi held a small knife in his hand, its blade glinting in the firelight. "Tonight is the night," he said with a serious look on his face. "We must be strong for what comes next." Abina nodded eagerly, his eyes shining with excitement. "Yes. We will gain power like never before." I felt a shiver run down my spine as I watched them prepare for their ritual. They began to chant softly, their voices rising and falling like a haunting song. The words were strange and made no sense to me, but they sounded powerful and frightening. As they chanted, Kofi reached down and pulled something from under the pot, a bundle wrapped tightly in cloth. My heart raced as I realized what it was, another baby. I wanted to scream, but forced myself to stay silent. This was worse than anything I had imagined. They were really going through with their terrible plan. Kofi carefully unwrapped the cloth to reveal a tiny baby, sleeping peacefully. My heart broke at the sight. This innocent child had no idea of the danger it was in. Abina took the baby from Kofi's hands and held it close. "Tonight, we will show our strength," Kofi said, raising his knife high in the air. "With this sacrifice, we will become powerful." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were planning to hurt this baby. Fear gripped me tightly as I realized that if I didn't do something soon, it would be too late. Just then, Abina looked around nervously. "What if someone sees us?" he asked. Kofi shook his head, his expression fierce. "No one will come here. We are safe." But even as he said this, there was a hint of doubt in his eyes. I knew that I had to act quickly. If they were going to hurt that baby, I couldn't just stand by and watch. Gathering all my courage, I stepped back from the doorway and ran toward the village. "Help! Someone help!" I shouted as loud as I could. I ran through the streets, calling for anyone who would listen. My heart raced as fear pushed me forward. The villagers began to peek out of their homes, confused by my cries. "Please! Kofi and Abina are doing something terrible," I yelled, trying to explain what was happening. A few villagers stepped out into the night, looking worried. "What do you mean?" one man asked. "They're at the old house. They have a baby." My voice trembled as panic surged through me. Without waiting for more questions, a group of brave villagers began to follow me toward the old house. As we ran through the dark streets together, hope mixed with fear filled my heart. But deep down, I knew that time was running out. Would we reach them in time? Would we be able to save that innocent life? All I could do was pray that we would make it before it was too late. As I ran through the village, my heart raced with fear and urgency. I could hear the footsteps of the villagers behind me, their voices filled with confusion and concern. "What's happening?" they asked, but I didn't have time to explain. All I could think about was saving that baby. We reached the old house, and I stopped at the door, panting heavily. The flickering light from inside danced on the walls, and I could hear Kofi and Abina's voices. They were still chanting, their words echoing eerily in the night. "Quick! We have to go inside." I urged the villagers, my voice shaky but determined. They nodded, ready to help. Together, we pushed open the creaky door and stepped into the dark room. The sight that met us was horrifying. Kofi and Abina were still standing around the pot, their faces lit by the fire. The baby lay on a makeshift altar nearby, wrapped in cloth and unaware of the danger surrounding it. "What are you doing?" one of the villagers shouted, stepping forward. Kofi and Abina turned to us, surprise flashing across their faces. "Get out!" Kofi yelled, his eyes wild with anger. "You don't belong here." But we didn't back down. More villagers joined us, standing tall and ready to protect that innocent life. "We know what you're planning," I shouted, my voice strong despite my fear. "You can't hurt that baby." Abina laughed, but it sounded nervous. "You think you can stop us? We are powerful now." He waved his knife in the air, trying to intimidate us. But we stood firm. The villagers began to move closer together, forming a protective line in front of the baby. "We won't let you take another life," one woman shouted. In that moment of tension, Kofi's expression changed from anger to panic. He realized that he was outnumbered. "We can't let them stop us," he said to Abina, his voice trembling slightly. Suddenly, Kofi lunged toward the pot as if he wanted to grab something from it. But before he could reach it, one of the villagers grabbed his arm firmly. "No. You won't hurt anyone." A struggle broke out as more villagers rushed in to help. I felt a mix of fear and hope as we fought against Kofi and Abina's desperation. The room filled with shouts and chaos as we tried to subdue them. In the midst of the struggle, I glanced at the baby lying on the altar. It was still sleeping peacefully, unaware of the danger surrounding it. My heart ached for that innocent child who had been caught in this nightmare. "Get the baby!" I shouted to one of the villagers. "We have to save it." A brave woman named Mama Amina rushed forward and gently picked up the baby, wrapping it securely in her arms. Relief washed over me as I saw her cradling it close to her heart. Just then, Kofi broke free from our hold and lunged toward Mama Amina with a furious look in his eyes. "Give me that child," he yelled. But before he could reach her, another villager stepped in front of him and pushed him back. "You need to stop this madness," he shouted. With all our strength combined, we managed to overpower Kofi and Abina. They struggled against us, but were no match for our determination to save that baby. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of fighting, we managed to tie them up using ropes we found in the old house. Breathing heavily, we stepped back to catch our breath. Mama Amina held the baby close, her eyes filled with tears of relief. "It's okay now," she whispered softly to the child. I stepped forward, my heart pounding. "We need to make them understand how wrong they are," I said firmly. "They can't just take innocent lives for their own power." Kofi glared at me, his eyes filled with rage. You don't know anything, he shouted. You think you can stop us? We are stronger than you realize. Abina nodded, his face twisted with anger. You'll pay for this. You have no idea what we can do. I felt a shiver run down my spine at their words. They were still caught up in their dark beliefs, and I knew we had to break through that mindset. You're wrong, I said, trying to stay calm. You've lost your way. This isn't strength, it's evil. One of the older villagers, an elder named Mr. Kwame, stepped forward. He was respected in our community and had seen many things in his life. Kofi, Abina, he said in a steady voice, you were once good men. You helped our village and brought joy to our lives. What happened to you? Kofi's expression softened for a moment, but then he shook his head violently as if trying to clear his thoughts. We found power. We found strength, he yelled again, desperation creeping into his voice. Mr. Kwame continued, but at what cost? You wanted power so badly that you were willing to harm innocent children? That is not strength, that is weakness. The room fell silent as everyone listened carefully to Mr. Kwame's words. I could see doubt flickering in Kofi's eyes as he struggled against the ropes binding him. Think about your family, Mr. Kwame urged softly. Think about how your actions affect everyone around you. Abina looked down at the ground, his anger slowly fading as he listened to the elder's words. I could see that deep inside, they were still the brothers we once knew. Please, I added, my voice shaking slightly, it's not too late to change. You can make things right. Kofi stared at me for a long moment, his expression shifting from anger to confusion and then sadness. I don't know what happened to us, he finally admitted quietly. Abina looked up at him, his face filled with regret. We thought we could become powerful, he said softly. But we lost ourselves along the way. The villagers exchanged glances, sensing a change in the atmosphere. It seemed like Kofi and Abina were beginning to realize the truth of their actions. Mr. Kwame took a step closer to them. You have a choice now, he said gently. You can choose to seek forgiveness and help heal our village instead of causing more pain. Tears filled Kofi's eyes as he looked around at all of us, his friends, family, and neighbors who had once looked up to him. The weight of what they had done hung heavy in the air. I'm so sorry, Kofi whispered finally, his voice breaking. We didn't know how far we had fallen. Abina nodded slowly, tears streaming down his cheeks too. We just wanted strength, but we lost everything that mattered. The villagers began to murmur among themselves, some nodding in understanding, while others still looked wary. It was clear that forgiveness wouldn't come easily after everything they had done.